let's just pick up where we left off last week. Okay, as you will recall, earlier theories about the development of agriculture tended to view it as a progressive event, or even as a catalyst for everything from art to industry. But I'm going to share a rather different view with you. From a revisionist perspective, the development of agriculture about 10,000 years ago didn't improve the lives of early farmers. On the contrary, when hunter-gatherers abandoned the age-old method of foraging for food and began to cultivate crops, they put their health at risk. Now I know it is just the opposite of, it is quite a different viewpoint, let's say. So, why would this be so? Why would their health decline when agriculture provided people with an efficient way to get more food for less work? Clearly, cultivated fields yield more food per acre than uncultivated land with undomesticated patches of berries and nuts. Well, first let's consider the conditions that are necessary for agriculture to flourish. In order to have enough labor to plant, tend, and harvest crops, a larger number of people must, they have to cooperate. That means that the density of the population must increase in the areas surrounding the cultivated farms. And, as you know, crowding contributes to the transmission of infectious diseases. So, when hunter-gatherers were wandering in small bands, the likelihood of an epidemic was slight. But after the agricultural revolution, tuberculosis and diseases of the intestinal tract, these began to reach epidemic proportions in the crowded agricultural communities. And, in addition, because the population was no longer mobile and relied on trade to inject variety into the lives and diets of the farmers, that meant that disease was also transmitted through the exchange of goods. Now, the revisionists also argue that the content of the diet for early farmers was inferior to that of the hunter-gatherers. You will recall that hunter-gatherers enjoyed a variety of foods selected from wild plants and game. And in studies of modern tribes that have continued the tradition of hunting and gathering food, it appears that the hunters and gatherers, they have a better balance of nutrients and even more protein than tribes that have adopted agricultural lifestyles. Today, 3 grain crops, wheat, corn, and rice, these account for the bulk of calories consumed by farming societies. So consider the implications. Extrapolating from this, and from evidence that early farmers raised only 1 or 2 crops, we can conclude that a disproportionate amount of carbohydrates formed the basis of their diets. Now, another interesting series of studies involved the skeletal remains of hunter-gatherers as compared with their agricultural relatives. And one such study from Greece and Turkey, it indicates that the average height of hunter-gatherers at the end of the Ice Age was, let me check my notes, yes, it was approximately 2.9 meters for men and 2.5 meters for women, and their bones were strong, healthy, and athletic. But after the agricultural revolution, skeletal remains revealed that height had diminished to a shocking 2.3 meters for men and 2 meters for women. And evidence from bone samples suggests that they suffered from diseases caused by malnutrition like anemia, and this is interesting. Further studies from fossilists at the University of Harvard project life expectancies for hunter-gatherers at about 26 years, but post-agricultural life expectancies were less than 20 years. Let me just read you something from one of the studies by Abraham Davis, and I quote, "Episodes of nutritional stress and infectious disease were seriously affecting their ability to survive," and he is referring to early farmers here. So let's see where we are. Oh yes, consider that hunter-gatherers had the advantage of mobility. So, if food wasn't plentiful, they broke camp and moved on in search of an area with a larger food supply. And If one type of food were in a short supply, for example, well, berries, then they wouldn't eat berries, but there would probably be a good supply of another type of food like nuts. Or hunting might compensate for a bad year for plant foods. But farmers were very vulnerable to crop failures. Remember, most early farmers cultivated only 1 or 2 crops. If there was a drought and the grain harvest failed, they didn't have other resources, and that's why they were subject to malnutrition or even starvation. So as you see, revisionists have made a rather convincing case. To sum it up, according to the revisionists, the development of agriculture put the health of early farmers at risk.